With a heavy heart today, we recognize our former colleague of 16 years here in the House of Representatives, Congressman Bill Posey. Sadly, on May 9th, he passed away, surrounded by his lovely family led by his fantastic wife, Katie, and their two children, Kathy and Pam. We have many members here tonight who would like to express their not only condolences to the family, but of course talk about his success serving our country, serving our state, and our community. And with that, I yield to the chairman of the Science Committee, Congressman Babin from Texas. You're recognized.
Thank you. And the first thing I'd like to say is just I appreciate this special order for our good friend, my good friend Mike Haridopolos, who is representing that great district on the Florida Space Coast. Today, Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor the life and legacy of our friend and our former colleague, Congressman Bill Posey. For more than a decade in Congress, Bill faithfully served the people of Florida's Space Coast with integrity, humility, and a deep love of his country. Before coming to Washington, he dedicated years to serving his community in local and state government, always guided by the belief that elected officials should answer first and foremost to those that they represent. But today I remember Bill not only as a colleague, but as a good friend. For 8 years, my wife Roxanne and I were neighbors across the hall from Bill and his wife Katie. Bill and Katie were the kind of friends who were always there when you needed them. Roxanne and I used to joke that if you ever needed to borrow a cup of milk or an egg in Washington, we knew exactly where to go, and that was across the hall. Bill represented one of the most fascinating districts in America, home to Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, and over the years I made many trips to Florida's Space Coast. Bill was always very, very proud to show me around. We attended launches and events together. We marveled at America's achievements in space exploration. We shared dinners, including Florida rock shrimp. As an East Texan, I wasn't quite sure what a rock shrimp was. But Bill convinced me they were worth trying, and he was right. Bill's enthusiasm for America's space program was contagious. He understood better than most the importance of innovation, exploration, and maintaining our nation's leadership in space. He championed the men and the women whose work keeps America at the forefront of discovery and inspired future generations to reach for the stars. Bill, as a young man, even worked on the Apollo program in the late 60s and early 70s, and he shared those experiences with me. Many people may not know that Bill was also a race car driver. That adventurous spirit never left him. Whether he was racing down a track or advancing America's space program, Bill approached life with energy and determination. He was a fierce champion of keeping America's science, space, and technology secure from our adversaries' prying eyes as well. Roxanne and Katie became the closest of friends over the years, and that friendship is something that our family will always cherish. For those who served alongside Bill, they will remember not only his accomplishments, but also his no-nonsense conservatism and his presence. Our thoughts and our prayers are with Katie, his family, his friends, former staff, and countless Floridians whose lives were touched by his long service. Bill Posey was a good man, a faithful public servant, a great friend, and he will be deeply missed. I yield back, and I'm jealous of you being able to represent that great district.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much for your kind words for our good friend.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Thompson,
Good job,
and from the great state of Pennsylvania. Mr. Thompson, you're recognized, sir.
Well, I thank the gentleman for sponsoring this hour to recognize my dear friend, Bill Posey. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. And I rise today with a heavy heart to share a few words about my dear friend, former Congressman Bill Posey. Bill was a devoted husband, father, grandfather, and a friend to many. He dedicated more than 20 years to public service in this chamber and in the Florida State Legislature, as a Florida State legislator. You know, Bill's reputation as a Florida legislator was one of a change maker. As the Florida governor noted, Bill Posey earned a reputation in the Florida legislature as a principled conservative, a problem solver, and a pioneer in government transparency and accountability, serving in both the Florida House from 1992 to the year 2000 and the Florida Senate from 2000 to 2008. He was widely respected for constituent service and principled leadership. Bill and I were first elected to Congress in 2009, and really it was during the November orientation after the election that I found my friend when we were sitting in new Congress member school, basically. And that was also the same time that my wife Penny and Katie started a relationship as dear friends that continues to this day. They both quickly became dear friends. And Bill was a mentor, helping me to find my legislative feet as someone who had never served in the state legislature. Him and his wife Katie helped Penny and I navigate life in Washington, D.C. And he truly was an esteemed colleague who was unwavering in his commitment to American values. Bill's love for Katie was undeniable. And Katie and my wife Penny continue to be the closest of friends. Bill served on the Committee on Financial Services and the Committee on Science, Space and Technology, fitting for a man who represented Florida's Space Coast and one who spent part of his career working at the Kennedy Space Center. I remember fondly his personal tour of Cape Canaveral and the pride of sharing the behind-the-scenes tour of the industry from the launch pad to the rubber room. During a personal visit to Florida, Penny and I spent time with Bill and Katie at their church camp for a couple's faith retreat. The messages were inspiring and the fellowship was outstanding. But I was troubled by the fact that they actually swam and canoed in water shared by alligators. I guess that's a Florida thing, definitely not a Pennsylvania thing. I had the opportunity to experience firsthand Bill's passion for racing, AKA driving fast. I rode with Bill in his muscle car to a local car show, and that is a ride I will soon not forget. Bill poured his heart into all that he did. He served with dignity and humility. His character and his wisdom will be sorely missed. He was a patriot. He was a conservative. He was a family man. He was a man of faith, and he was my friend. I find comfort in knowing that he was welcomed in the arms of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Penny and I will be attending a memorial and celebrating Bill's life this coming Saturday in Florida. May God bless Bill's loved one. And I thank the gentleman from Florida. I yield back.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Mr. Chairman. I know you're dear friends.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize the Congressman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs. You're recognized, sir. And I had the pleasure, actually, the first time I had the pleasure of meeting you because of Bill Posey. I remember that event we did together back in Vero Beach, and we look forward to serving together in the years to come. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that well, and I thank you for allowing me to speak a little bit about our friend. And I also thank you for, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Congressman Bill Posey, who represented Florida's 15th and 8th districts for more than 16 years and devoted his career to serving the people he loved. Bill's public service began in the 70s on the Rockledge City Council, and he went on to serve in both the Florida House and the Florida Senate. He earned a reputation as a champion of fiscal responsibility, government accountability, and policies that strengthened working families. He never viewed public office as a platform for himself. He saw it as a responsibility to serve others with integrity and purpose. Bill's commitment to his district was unmatched. He loved his district. He loved the Space Coast. He understood its history, its industries, its people, and no one fought harder for America's leadership in space exploration. Drawing on his own experience working on the Apollo program at Kennedy Space Center, he became one of Congress's strongest advocates for NASA, domestic manufacturing, and the aerospace workforce that defines Florida's Space Coast. He showed how a member can fiercely defend a district's core industries without falling into subsidies or cronyism, staying true to his principles of limited government and free market strength. Bill was also a national leader in advancing transparency. He pushed Congress to read the bills it votes on and was instrumental in securing the rule that requires legislation be publicly available for 72 hours before a vote. Wouldn't it be nice to go back to that? Sure would be nice to go back to that standard that Bill worked so hard to set up. He worked to reform and strengthen trust in the institution and reminded all of us that accountability begins right here at home in Congress. I had the privilege of serving with Bill in the House Freedom Caucus, where we fought side by side for limited government, fiscal discipline, and the belief that Washington works best when it works within the Constitution. And Bill lived those principles every day. And getting back to what we were talking about, he invited me to come on down. I was the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, and he said, I need you to come on down to my district. And we went, and it was basically a day and a half of a real education for me in campaigning, because there was not a free moment to sit down. And I will tell you this, I couldn't understand why he thought I needed to be down there, because he was so well loved. It's amazing. Bill Posey approached public service with humility, steadiness, and a deep love for the people he represented. He will be missed. I miss him. And his wonderful wife, Katie, I wish to express my condolences to her. What a gracious host she was for me. When I was down there, she made sure I had everything I needed and more. But I will say this, Bill leaves behind a legacy of principled leadership, tireless advocacy, love of family, love of country, love of God, and an example of how to be a member of Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Biggs, very much. And again, for your personal visit as well. It means a lot to us. Yeah. Thanks for being here tonight. God bless you.
Good to see you.
Next, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce my colleague from Florida, Congressman Gus Bilirakis, who we, of course, served together with Congressman Posey in the Florida legislature in the early 2000s as part, of course, that memorable election of 2000 as well. And I yield now to my colleague from Florida, Congressman Bilirakis.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. My good friend, he is my good friend, Mr. Haridopolos. I did serve with Bill Posey, Mr. Speaker, in the legislature, and I remember my first year, in 1998, I had made a campaign promise, and I was going to keep that promise. Not going to get into the legislation, but the leadership was pushing a particular bill, and I had made a promise to my constituents that I would not be for that particular policy. And Bill stuck up for me. It's tough when you're a freshman. And he stuck up for me. He said, just go right ahead and do what you think is right and what is in the best interest of your constituents. I never forgot that. And also, Bill endorsed me when I first ran for Congress. He was one of the first ones to do that. Integrity, he kept his word. Now, I will tell you, he had a great sense of humor as well. When I first ran in 1998, my opponent, I guess because of my stature, called me Danny DeVito. And so Bill, on the floor of the House of Representatives for 16 years, called me Danny. And, when he did it publicly, they would whisper in his ear, other members, and say, Bill, that's not his name. His name is Gus. And he'd say, I know that. It's a joke between the two of us. And he was just a genuinely great guy and cared about this country so very much. So I do rise to honor the life and legacy of my dear friend and former colleague, Congressman Bill Posey, whose decades of public service left an indelible mark on the state of Florida and, of course, our nation. Bill was a dedicated public servant. Again, he never deviated from his principles. He was a conservative and, above all, a man of integrity. Long before we served together in the House of Representatives, as I said, Bill and I had the privilege of serving alongside one another in the Florida legislature. He was a senior member, I was a junior member. But he never treated me differently. During those years, I came to know him as a thoughtful policymaker, a tireless advocate for his constituents, and someone who approached every issue with humility, common sense, and a deep respect for the people he represented. When Bill was elected to Congress, he carried those same values with him to Washington, D.C. He never lost sight of who sent him here, and he worked diligently to ensure that the voices of Florida's families, seniors, veterans, small businesses, again, taxpayers, were heard. His commitment to fiscal responsibility, government accountability, and public service earned the respect of his colleagues, as you can see here, on both sides of the aisle. Even if the other side didn't agree with him, they certainly respected him. What I will remember most, however, is not Bill's legislative accomplishments, as impressive as they were, and they were impressive, but his character, Mr. Speaker. He was a loyal friend, a devoted husband and father, and a grandfather, and a man of deep faith whose actions reflected his values every single day. He treated everyone with kindness and respect and conducted himself with a level of civility that serves as an example for all who choose a life of public service. He truly was a throwback. My thoughts and prayers are with his wonderful wife, Katie. What a great individual. What a wonderful person, and he loved her so very much. My thoughts and prayers are with his children, his grandchildren, his friends, and his former staff, and all who had the privilege of knowing him. While he would be greatly missed, and he will be, his legacy of service, leadership, and dedication to the people of the state of Florida and the United States of America will endure for generations to come. He was a great role model. May his memory be eternal. I yield back, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Congressman Bilirakis, for your kind words for our good friend, Congressman Posey. Thank you.
As are you.
Thank you. I'd like to yield now to the Congresswoman from Maryland, Ms. Delaney. Is that be fine? Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, I rise today to honor the memory and legacy of Representative Bill Posey and his long legacy in public service to the state of Florida, to our country, and to the field of science and innovation. My husband, John Delaney, served with him on financial services and considered him a friend, and greatly admired his knowledge of the banking sector, his integrity, his ability to always reach across the aisle, and to always be pragmatic. I admire him now as a current member, but looking back on his long experience on SST, where he had a commitment, as my long experience on SST, where he had a commitment to aerospace, to NASA, to satellite services, and to innovation generally. Most especially, I was a friend of Katie Posey for many years while a congressional spouse at the Congressional Club. Both of them served well in terms of their bipartisan relationships, lifting up to know the other congressional families. They were always full of faith, civility, and a deep sense of service to country and to others. God bless their family. I send my deepest condolences, and I thank him for his service, and I give my best to Katie and family.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Delaney, for your kind words. I know you're a dear friend, especially with Katie, and it means a lot to us that you're here tonight. I know there are others who are coming in and out tonight, but I wanted to kind of give those who are listening some background, as some have mentioned, about Bill's storied career in Florida politics, and is it a memorable one. I had the opportunity to know Bill for almost 30 years. And he was a true mentor of mine as I was elected back to the House of Representatives in 2000 when he had moved over to the state Senate. And he always offered a guiding, smart hand to a young member of the legislature. And it was that confidence that allowed me to find some success in the legislature, because he treated like a son. And it really meant a lot to me for a person who was just such a storied figure in our community, who would take the time for new members to get up to speed on some of the challenges we faced in Tallahassee at that time. One of the people that really made a difference on me as well is one of his former staffers, now my staffer, Valentina Valenta. She is a remarkable person who understands the budget inside and out, because Bill focused so much on the transparency angle in the budget. That was his passion. And as Congressman Biggs talked about earlier, this idea of a 72-hour rule is something we have in the state of Florida. We are the Sunshine State, and he really believed that when you're spending other people's money, you should allow time so that it goes into the sunshine. Because as he liked to say, good ideas in the sunshine prosper and grow. Bad ideas are wither under that powerful sunshine as well. And so that was the vision of what Bill Posey had when he served in not only the United States Congress, but before then the state Senate, before then the state legislature, and before then in local government, on the city council in Rockledge. And Bill was a person who put it simply, when there was a problem, like a good NASCAR or maybe a NASA mechanic, he went out and fixed it. He didn't care about the headlines. In fact, whenever I talked to him, he tried to avoid the press. He wanted to do his work behind the scenes, work with people, and just go out and solve problems and then get back to his family and friends who understood his commitment to his home community known as Brevard County. And that's what Bill really was mentioned, as I think Congressman Babin and others talked about. His heart was always in Brevard. Though he served here in Washington for 16 years, he was always focused on Brevard County and making sure we did not have some of the challenges we faced after the Apollo program. He did so much to make sure that when the shuttle program was ended in 2011 and 12, that we made a successful transition over to what we now know as the Artemis project that is so successful, which back in April found, of course, so much success going around the moon for the first time since 1972. It was his work behind the scenes with so many other members here in Congress. And I'm proud to say that with NASA, as my colleague Debbie Wasserman Schultz is here today, it was a bipartisan project to make sure that Florida stayed the epicenter of space flight in America, and we're seeing that success today. And it's, again, that work behind the scenes that no one saw and no one really thought possible, that we can find the amazing success we're seeing today with new companies along the lines. In fact, one of those being SpaceX, which is being potentially valued at over $1.75 trillion to show where we're going in space. So with that, I would like to yield time to my former Senate colleague in the legislature and now congressional colleague, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You are recognized. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Congressman Haridopolos. I thank the gentleman for yielding and for your leadership and really compassion for our dear friend Bill Posey. You know, it's the term friend is thrown around loosely in politics, but and Bill was someone who had a wry sense of humor, someone who you knew where you stood with him. He was someone who didn't mince words, and someone who didn't take himself or really almost anything too seriously. It always had kind of a joke that was on his lips, but he was, as Congressman Haridopolos mentioned, really someone who lived and breathed the Space Coast. He was really the voice of NASA here in the Congress, and he always fiercely stood up for his community and his people. He was humble. He was someone who did not swing from the rafters. You knew that he cared about the issues that he worked on, but he kept his head down, his nose to the grindstone, and he focused on his core set of priorities. And that's why I'm here today, to honor our late colleague, Congressman Bill Posey. He was a man who loved his home state of Florida, and someone who was willing to put aside partisan politics to make it a better place for all of us. I can personally vouch for this because he and I worked together since we began our public service work all the way back in 1992, when we were both elected to the Florida House of Representatives in the legislature. We also were subsequently elected in the same year to the state Senate, and it continued well into our time here in Congress. Congressman Posey was a no-nonsense, principled legislator. And of course, we had our differences. We had many of them, in fact. We used to laugh about how little we agreed on. But when we came together and when we could find an issue on which we could work together. Really, it was always incredibly impactful. Bill Posey was committed to making Florida's coastlines and our children safer. He could drop his partisan flags and cross the aisle, even in our most recent times when so many others would waver or refuse. And I saw it immediately, too, when he and I both worked together in Tallahassee. In Florida's capital, we joined forces to prevent children from drowning by ensuring our pools and spas were safer. And that's no small matter in the Sunshine State. And I'll tell you, I was working for 3 years to pass the Miriam McKenzie and Preston D. Iburn Swimming Pool Spa and Safety Act, Residential Swimming Pool Spa and Safety Act in Florida. And it was tough. There was a lot of Republican opposition. And I remember the day like it was yesterday when Bill came over to me and he said, "You make a lot of sense. We've got to stop the kids from drowning. These are entirely preventable tragedies," and he just got it. And so he spent political capital because he knew that it mattered and he knew it would save lives. And he was someone in Congress who just continually kept at the issues that mattered to his constituents. He was a fierce advocate for the Space Coast, as well as Florida's estuaries. And those are the common bonds, really, that draw all Floridians together. We're a delegation that there's a boatload of things that we don't agree on, but when it comes to protecting fiercely our coastline, whether it's from oil drilling or whether it's making sure that we can continue to restore the Florida Everglades, or if it's ensuring that we can protect our homeowners, our condominium owners, kids in our year-round warm weather state who really have a much higher likelihood of drowning. Bill was right there on so many issues. So another example, after the nation saw the tragic death of 98 souls in Surfside, Florida, you remember when the Surfside, when the Surfside condominium building came crashing down in the middle of the night, 1:30 in the morning. That Champlain Towers South was in my congressional district at the time, and I went to Bill, and we knew we had to do something about making sure that those condominium buildings, especially on the coastline, were safe. And I asked him to co-lead the Making Condos Safer and Affordable Act. People all over our state need that help, so we worked together to push legislation that would help maintain their structural integrity and keep residents safe. And there are other bright moments over his long career, as my colleagues have attested, and for that, he will be truly missed. My heart is with his beloved wife, Katie, who was always by his side, never far. She was a true life partner, and my condolences to their loved ones, and may Bill's memory be for a blessing. Thank you. I yield back to the gentleman.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. Great to see you. And I know Bill spoke highly of how you all work together across party lines. We're really grateful you're here tonight.
Thank you.
So I wanted to close tonight, just kind of walk through some of the things that Bill did work on as the Congresswoman just spoke of. And it was a passion for him. He saw problems and he fixed them. And that's what, again, I loved about Bill. As I mentioned earlier, he was a person who stayed out of the limelight. He didn't really care about who got the credit, but he wanted to just go out and solve problems. He was, again, a mechanic at heart. And one of those issues, as Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz talked about, was the Indian River Lagoon. This is a lagoon that historically has had challenges, and Bill was passionate about taking on this. And one of the issues where he did, again, work across the aisle was what he created with members of the other side of the aisle on the Estuary Caucus. That is where we're focused on solving the problem, where it's not just happening in our home state, but around the country, how we can clean up our rivers that eventually work into our oceans. And it was mentioned with NASA, again, a champion for NASA, not just because he represented the area, but he literally worked on the Apollo program. And it was something that he knew would bring America together, even in the most partisan of times. And before entering politics, he was a person who, after leaving his work at the Kennedy Space Center, went into the real estate business and found tremendous success. But he was willing to put aside that incredible economic success for his own family because he wanted to serve this country. That's why he entered public life and left a lot of, candidly, let's just say, resources on the sideline because he chose to serve in public life. But he was known as Mr. Fix-It. And I'll be talking about this at his celebration of life on Saturday in Melbourne. But one of the issues that what really separated him, as Congressman Wasserman Schultz talked about on some fronts, but was everybody remembers the election of 2000. That was the year where we had the hanging chads. And of course, that incredibly razor-thin election where Florida would decide the election. And candidly, we were embarrassed at what happened in the election of 2000. And so when people looked around the room in the Florida House and Florida Senate, and when Jeb Bush was governor, they said, who are we going to bring in to fix the election laws in the state of Florida? They brought on Bill Posey. And if you haven't noticed, guess who's running the best elections right now in the entire country? The state of Florida. I remember just when I was elected last November 2024, within 7 minutes, we knew not only who won the election, but almost all the results were in after the polls closed at 7 p.m. in Florida. That's how remarkable, that's how efficient we want it to be. Counting those early votes, counting those absentee ballots, and then once those ballots were tabulated, within minutes, you knew the verdict. Very different from what we're seeing actually right now in some states. That was who Bill Posey was. He saw a problem, he wanted to fix it, and he never talked about it again. That was the ironic part about it. Here was a person who should be known around the country for fixing elections in a positive way and getting the tabulations done quickly and correctly. And that's what we need more of in America, is a problem solver like him. Also was mentioned as being on the Financial Services Committee. When I was thinking about what committees to serve on as I now enter Congress, I went to him and I said, where was your passion? He said, Mike, I held out for one job, and that was to be on financial services. He really felt like some of the banking laws in our country needed common sense reforms, and he worked all 16 years on the Financial Services Committee. So many people saw his work with NASA, but as French Hill, our current chairman, talks about, Bill Posey was always diligently there, pushing for the idea of transparency. Because through the years, we've seen horrible situations, whether it be Enron or, of course, the housing market crash. He was focused on making sure when people put those dollars in banks or in investments, that there was more transparency, that the investor actually had the information in front of him. That was the kind of person he was. And I'm just so grateful that his colleagues who served with him for so long showed up tonight, because it was that work behind the scenes that really made a difference. And what I saw firsthand in our 25-year-plus relationship was that it was always remarkable watching Bill, a tried and true financial or fiscal conservative, be willing to listen to whoever came before him. He was a person who said, you don't have to, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's what I loved about him. He could be a little cantankerous at times, but he always took the time to listen. And as I mentioned, and I'll mention again over and over, he never left Brevard County. Whenever he could get out of Washington, he got out of Washington. And he and Katie loved to get back home and be around the people they loved most, especially their daughters, Katie and Kathy. And after he left Congress in 2024, after those elections, he spent really the last 18 months being involved in those passion projects. One of those is he was actually involved in a car rally across the country as he and Katie went around the country. And I'm still amazed that they actually did it, because it was a challenging race, but he had such a passion for cars. And I remember we even went to New Smyrna Racetrack for the Governor's Cup many years, because he just loved stock car racing. That was his passion and was in his blood. And most recently, of course, he spent so much time with his grandkids, whether it be out west in California or in Alabama, and spending a ton of time with his daughter, especially those who live in Brevard County. He was a guy who put family first, and it wasn't a cliche. And he was a person who, again, was passionate about things when other people took passion in those same ideas. And I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to know him for so long, as he served our country so ably, and he gave back so much and took on so many financial challenges because he loved this country so much. And Mr. Speaker, of course, I would like to ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to which they can revise and extend their remarks. and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order. And so as I close, and before I yield to our friends on the other side of the aisle, Bill Posey will not be forgotten because he never forgot those folks who gave him this opportunity to be here. And I'm looking forward to seeing so many friends back at home on Saturday as we celebrate his life. I was with him, sadly, that Thursday before he passed on the Saturday, and to see the love that his family expressed in those days as they know they were going to leave him for a period of time, it just shows the commitment that his family had for him because he loved his family and he loved this country. And I'll try to leave it on a lighter note. I remember he said to me when I got elected to the legislature, he said, Mike, I remember when I was first elected to the legislature, and I couldn't believe I was in the Florida legislature. Here was a guy from Rockledge, Florida, who grew up loving cars and space and had a beautiful family and a young wife. And then he said, after about a month or so, I couldn't believe how these other people got here. That was the thing about Bill Posey. He had that wry sense of humor, as Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz spoke of. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity for us to speak about our good friend Bill Posey. He'll be dearly missed, but he's a true patriot and friend to our community, and I know I have very big shoes to fill here in the United States Congress. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Without a